that works, and it's really interesting, and the design is really complicated. And it's just really interesting how everything has a purpose. And so anyway, there's the breakdown of that. I don't have to go through that. Next is the other part to that, the female part of the gamete, right? And that's the egg. And so in meiosis, as you know, here we have the 4, which I thought was really interesting, is it doesn't divide evenly, okay? The sperm do, but not the eggs, not the gamete, the female gametes. One ends up, they keep pushing the nutrients and all the extra stuff into one, because it has to survive for quite a while on its own before it starts getting nutrients from like the mother's placenta. And so it has to have more nutrients. And so to do that, they don't spread it out equally. They keep pushing all the nutrients into one. All right. So out of the 4 that's produced in meiosis, only one of these could actually function. Okay. If any of these were fertilized, it would not result in a child. It would not start duplicating and growing into a child. Only if it's this cell. Okay. That's the egg cell. It has the most, what you want to call it? The most material, genetic material. It has the most of everything. It has the most cytoplasm, everything. It has more. And compared to the sperm and the polar, this is called a polar body, what's not the egg cell. The egg has the most in it out of all of them, okay? That's important too. Okay, that's called oogenesis or oocyte. I think I said that right? Oogenesis, that's how I've always called it. But anyway, that's how the haploid cell matures into the female gamete, which we call the egg. Okay, hope that's making sense. And then we move into fertilization. We talked about that a little bit. Fertilization is when, there's a good picture of it, when obviously the sperm cell meets the egg cell, and that acromal head that's at the tip of the sperm actually breaks down the enzymes in the covering around the egg. And see, these were trying, but only this one actually got in. And so the sperm nucleus is going to meet the egg nucleus, and boom, fertilization happens, and we have a baby. Does that make sense? I know I sound so country on this video. I feel like it's way worse on the video than it is in person. I like to think I don't sound this country, but I know I do. Anyway, so that's fertilization. You need to know that too. Let me think. Oh yeah, hermaphrodites. Those, there's not many organisms like that, but there are a few. I always think of a worm. I feel like maybe, if you give us an example, some types of animals, some fish are, that's interesting. But basically they're both. They are not male or they're not female. They have, their body can produce female and male gametes. Those are hermaphrodites, which is interesting. Like it says, some fish can switch. I've heard of that in other animals too. Like if they're on the brink of extinction, they can switch their gametes to be able to reproduce so they don't go extinct, which is interesting. We can't do that as humans, but there are organisms out there that are hermaphrodites, and that's what that means, that they have both. Okay, last thing is AI. I'm kind of a sci-fi nerd. I really enjoyed this section. There's not like a ton that you have to know. I just thought it was super interesting. AI obviously is the development of computer systems able to perform tasks that normally require human intelligence, like visual perception, speech recognition, making decisions, translating between languages. We know about AI. Y'all see it a lot. You use it. If y'all have phones, at least, you're using it. But this guy in the chapter is just covering the fact that people like to get all, you know, can they actually reproduce? Like in some of the movies, could robots take over the world? Could they reproduce? And he goes into explaining how no, it would be absolutely impossible. They would have to, so much would have to be programmed. They would have to be programmed where to find the materials to make another robot, where to find those materials when those materials run out. And if something doesn't go right, how do you fix it? And it goes into a lot of depth explaining it. If you haven't read it, do read it. It's really interesting. And all it does is, I'll just read the last of it. I'll read the summary. But you've probably read it, but I'll read it to you because it's really interesting. It says, in the end, the only life forms capable of true reproduction. Only life forms are capable of true reproduction. The extent of the controls and the complexity of the design precludes any object from being able to acquire this ability. So while technological advances have enabled us to produce wonderful tools to make life easier, there are limits that cannot be overcome. This confirms that life is truly marvelous and even beyond our comprehension. It just shows how great it is, how great our God is, and how with all the technology we have and all the intelligence that we have, we can make a pretty cool robot. We still can't even begin to remotely make anything as sophisticated and as complicated as reproduction of humans, reproduction of anything. You see how complicated this is, and y'all, this is still just skimming the surface. It could get much more deeper than even this book goes on how things are actually reproduced. It's amazing, and there's great design there, and that just shows how great our God is. But that's an overview. If you grasp most of the things we talked about, y'all do fine on your test. Hopefully you could hear me and not too much of my children in the background. If you have any questions, text me, call me, message me. You know, if it's something that, which all of this stuff, I mean, y'all got your mamas there and your daddy's there, and y'all can study through this together. But I've read it and studied it too. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask me, because I had to, you know, learn it myself. Some of it I had to refresh my memory. I didn't remember all this from when I learned this years and years ago. So feel free to reach out. If not, y'all have a good week.